Okay, so I grew up in South Africa. I grew up religious. My grandfather was a preacher in the church. And so I kind of...
Which church?
It's a, we call it Dutch Reformed Church.
Ooh.
You know anything of that?
Calvinist.
Yeah.
Paul
So-
Gio was Dutch Reformed.
Okay. So I grew up in that kind of the religious role. So I get it. I get where the people come from. I believed all of it. I was fooled as well. And then it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when I made kind of the conversion. And definitely at university, I still remember my freshman year at university going to church. I have to admit, it was mostly because that's where the girls went, and I knew that it's a good place, but I was still into it, and during my college kind of time, somewhere something changed. I've always been a very curious person about a lot of different things. So I studied engineering. Didn't have a really good reason for studying that. My dad's an engineer. Kind of, they say if you're good at math and science, do engineering, and I was there, okay. But I was also interested in things like quantum physics. At that stage, string theory was big, and I kind of, on the side, always read about string theory. And I've always liked astronomy, you know, stars and planets and all of that. So I've always had kind of a lot of different interests. And I think maybe through that, as you read a lot, you kind of better understand the world, and you kind of figure out there's no need for religion. But definitely the cherry on the cake was my dad actually gave me The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins and said, read this book. Okay. I'm proud to say that, as I said here, both my parents, both my brothers, and both my brothers are also married. Their wives, we're all atheists.
Okay.
So we kind of all got out of it.
So you say you kind of grew up in the church. You were all in, but were your parents? So your parents were in as well. Like they were encouraging this, and
yes.
Okay.
They took us to church. They took us to Sunday school. We did Bible study at home every night.
So when did the God Delusion get into the mix? Like, how old were you when he gave you this book, and what was his trajectory? Was he?
Was university. So I was at university a long time because I did, you know, undergrad, master's, PhD. So that's like a tincture stretch. Somewhere along that line, I was definitely a grad student. So it was probably end of master's, beginning of PhD about that he gave me the book.
Was his father still alive?
No.
Okay.
His father, my grandfather was a preacher. He passed away when I was 3 months old. So I never knew him. But I grew up with all these old Bibles in the house. After it was kind of, you know, we talked about this openly when everyone was atheist in the family. My mother actually said she never believed. But my dad kind of, she just went with it because my dad said. And my dad said even when we were still young, he started questioning the things. So even while sending us to church and reading Bible to me and doing all of that, he wasn't really super sold on everything. And I guess probably the God Delusion also got him over the edge, and that's why he said read this, and the book kind of went down from me to my brother, and so as it happens, and maybe you know this as well, or you've experienced this, once you kind of get out, for the first while you were a little militant, right? Come on, stupid guys, how can you still believe that? And so I'm getting to why I wrote the book, and so I got into a lot of arguments with people, and as you will know, if you argue with someone, you can never really convince them of your point of view, right? You bring the facts. It's crazy to think Mary was a virgin. How, you know, why? But they will not budge. And so I guess sort of through that, I realized that you'll never convince someone when you just have an argument on a singular topic, right? Something small, because that kind of topic is but a small part of a much more complex, big belief system they have. Like, it's a whole worldview that you need to break down. Not just the one, Mary is not a virgin, or, you know, miracles don't happen, or any of that. it's a whole belief system, especially if you grow up in the church. I mean, from a young age, it drains because God. This happens because God. And that in your, I do neural engineering research, so I've read a lot about the brain as well. And so literally your brain, the brain wants to make sense of the world, right? That's kind of what the brain does. The better model you have of the world, the better your chance of survival. And if you're from a young age, if you're kind of indoctrinated with all of this, everything is due to God, it kind of gets wide in your brain. It's difficult to get out of that. And so I started thinking back, and I thought, okay, it's probably because I started reading a lot about a lot of different things, and slowly I broke off all these kind of old ideas and replaced it with, this is how the universe works. This is how life works. This is how this works. And kind of slowly you get rid of God everywhere. Because God is everywhere, right, initially. But you can slowly get rid of Him in all aspects. So, I guess I wrote the book to try and do that. It is the 42. I don't know if you're all familiar with the 42 from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Anyone not? You all know? In a nutshell, deep thought supercomputer spent 7 million years to figure out what's the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, and it's 42. And so, I decided let's call it 42. Actually, I had the book evolved a lot in my mind. I've had this idea of writing something like this. 42 came right at the end, so it had different kind of forms in my mind, many different forms. But in the end, it's 42 chapters, and so each chapter takes on sort of something small. So, and I work with the 3 themes of life, the universe, and everything to kind of turn it around. We start with the universe, so start with the Big Bang, right? And how the universe started, stars, galaxies, Earth. So every chapter takes one of those topics, and then we get into everything, and we go down to quantum mechanics. What is sort of the basic? I try to make it hopefully accessible. It's not super technical, for people to just have a basic understanding of how the world works.
Yeah, and I can vouch for it. You know, it's very readable. Very readable. You know, of course, my background's science, but I'm not a PhD. You know, and so for just a lay reader, it's definitely readable.
And then, so I guess part of this. So, if you argue with people, not about arguing, but if you have disagreements with people, right? It can be annoying when they just can't see your point of view, or if they're kind of stuck on this thing, and you know that the problem is because there's a sort of a disagreement on facts, and we should never disagree on facts, right? Some things are fundamentally true, and if we all have sort of this same, I want to say belief system, or same, if we have the same facts about how the world is and works, I think it would be easier to work together, and we can get past a lot of disagreement if our kind of initial premises are just the same. And so that's sort of the idea with the first part of the book. That's the universe and everything. It's telling it how it is. This is how the universe started. This is quantum physics, particle physics, all of that. So this is how everything works. And then the second half is, okay, based on how the world works, how ought we live? How do we live a good life? And I think it's easier to get into how to live a good life if we understand how the world works and what is true. If you disagree on that, you're probably going to disagree on how to live there. And so this is my attempt to save the world. It feels like we're in a big mess at the moment. There's so much disagreement. And I would venture to say that a lot of the disagreement is because we have disagreements about sort of the fundamental things, the basic building blocks.
Would you say are things getting muddier because it's so easy to find your own facts? You know, it's really tough to come to an agreement as to what are the fundamental facts.
I think that is the problem at the moment. I mean, information is great, knowledge is great, but there's almost too much information out there. And how do you know what's true and what's not true? So, again, hopefully I try to into one-size accessible chapters. So most of what's in the book is not my own ideas. It's, I go to the experts on quantum physics, and I read a lot of Sean Carroll's books, and also for Big Bang stuff. So Lawrence Krauss, and you read Neil deGrasse Tyson. So I try to read and see what's the scientific consensus on the topic, and go there. Every now and then there's no consensus in science, so especially consciousness. That's a difficult chapter to write. What is consciousness? And then sort of the interpretation of quantum physics is also a difficult one. There's many different people who think different things there. I'm not even sure where I am exactly on sort of the interpretation of many worlds versus Copenhagen versus, what was my point now? Oh yeah, so if we can all sort of have a shared view of how the world works, if we have the same worldview, right? And I'm not saying we should all think the same and have the same taste in music and the same taste in ice cream. Some disagreement is good. We need diversity, diverse thoughts. But again, I'm back to, we should have the same facts, right, about how the world works. Because science it's amazing how much we actually know. And we can explain so much. And we should just, if everyone just has a basic understanding of science and how the world works, I think it's easier to have open discussions about, okay, given these facts, how would we live our lives? And it will be a better world. So it's in the end, it maybe started with religion, but in the end, it's a bit more.
Yeah, I was going to ask, which would to you be more important, that people all have the same views on like religion or the existence of a God, or that everyone have the same views on what's the most effective economic system?
That's a good question. Probably more on let's have. So I'm not too worried about the religion part. I try actually to never mention religion in the book. So I never say God is bad or anything. I just don't talk about God. Why even bring him into the conversation? I think for me it's more important that people have the same basic understanding just of what are the fundamental building blocks of the world. Where does everything come from? I mean, if we really go into sort of fundamental physics, right? You have cause and effect. We have many particles, and they obey the laws of physics, and that's basically all there is, right? Out of all of this emerges free will and all of that, and it kind of makes you to see life a little differently. So that's sort of one aspect.
I will commend our group. Anytime we've done an astronomy night, it's been a large contingent of FAAMSU people who have come out to the observatory. These are the curious bunch.
I think that's the other awesome perspective for me. So you have the super small, the physics, and then the astronomy perspective. So looking at what's going on Earth from the view of, I mean, even just Mars, but you go out of our galaxy and the different galaxy. It's so insignificant, right? All these stupid fights we have, and if you can just have that kind of way of saying, why didn't we all just live peacefully together? I want you to have a good life, right? So, best economic system? I don't know if it necessarily would be a good idea if everyone just agrees on that, because then maybe we're missing something better, right? We also, this is the best, and we just do that. Maybe we're missing something. So, I think it's something like that. Disagreement is good. We should always have discussions about, is this the best? We should always question kind of our accepted truths of what institutions do and say. Always. Just question, is this, but I've tried this, don't do that. So don't question the institution of marriage when you're married. So my wife didn't like that when I said, why do we get married? So this is still relevant in this day and age.
That's a fun thing to hear.
Yeah. But there's some truth in that. Why do, I mean, if you go look into why we got married in the past, mostly it was sort of the man making sure that the offspring I get from this woman, they are mine. So you are mine, because when I die, I need to leave all my earthly possessions to my, my kids. And so that's sort of how marriage started, that you can make sure the kids are mine. We don't live in that world anymore, right? I don't know, maybe, but you can get tasted now. Is that really mine?
So don't go to him for marriage counseling, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So, any questions? Anything you want to ask? Yes.
So I know you talked about basically, the disagreements in quantum and whatnot about how things actually happen with the Big Bang, whether consciousness is something or not. And at least my take on it, it's okay to not know that. It's not okay to not be sure how the universe was made and whatnot. And I find myself when disagreeing with religious people about this. Their issue is the fact they don't feel comfortable in that type of knowledge or in the capability to acknowledge that maybe we just don't know that. Which, first of all, it's kind of funny because there's a contradiction there. Because to act as if you know everything is to act like God, which is hubris, which there's a bit of tension there, and pointing that out doesn't go well. But nevertheless, I don't know, at least from your experience, you know how to get over that, to make somebody accept that some things are just not known at the moment. Because I feel like that's kind of the cope out for a lot of people when it comes to religion. They want to have the answers to everything. They want that stability and sense of just knowing that X is X and so on.
Yeah, I guess you're right. So in a way, religion gives you that comfort of, we know everything, right?
Yeah.
I can sleep soundly at night. There's nothing we don't know.
Or if we don't know it, we can trust that someone out there does know it and is looking out for us in particular.
That's it's probably difficult to open people's eyes to that, because in a way God cannot lose, right? If things go well, it's God. If it goes bad, God is testing me. You cannot lose. It's always just He wins. And how do you be that, right? But one of my, so when I was still a sort of militant atheist, I love to watch on YouTube these debates between the atheist versus the apologetic. And one of my favorite ones was actually Bill Nye versus Ken Ham. And Bill Nye so many times said, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that, we don't know. You just need to look at the history of humanity, how much we know now that we didn't know 100 years ago. And I mean, the way AI is taking over the world now, knowledge is increasing, and it's a lot of things we didn't know, we will know. But even the things we will never know. So I mentioned in the book as well, something like the origin of life on Earth, right? I think for me, what helps me is to say there are many very plausible theories out there. It could have been, there's the RNA world first, or there's the metabolism world first. All of these super good theories. Anyone could be true. We'll probably never know which one was true, but the fact that there are good theories versus God did it. These are better theories, so let's stick to those and get into those more than God did it. So even if we don't even know that, I think we know it's plausible that probably it happened that life somewhere it was non-life and it became life. But it's a super fuzzy transition, right? It wasn't non-life, 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 life. There was a big gray area where it was sort of life, maybe, I don't know. It's something that replicates and it kind of gets the characteristics of life. So, maybe there's things we'll never be able to answer, but I don't know, you have to be okay with that.
Yeah, and that's the question. How do you, what is it? Is it psychology? Is it neurology? Why are we're hardwired to want certainty? And how can you get someone who seems to want to sacrifice, they will sacrifice what's actually true for this feeling of certainty, that comfort they get? How can you let the knowledge or the desire for truth override the psychological comfort? What's the secret sauce there?
I don't know if there's a secret sauce. I guess it is, so again, we are hardwired to want to know. So we'll make up anything that can maybe explain what we see, right? So let's throw this person in the volcano and see if the gods are happy then. And if by accident it works, okay, it works. So my theory works. There's a God and they listen to me. And in a way, it probably gives you comfort. So, okay, I tested this, it's right. But I want to say we know better now, right? To get to your point, for me, it is there are more contradictions in the other belief system than in mine. Even if I have to say I don't know, in a way, I feel my whole worldview is a lot more coherent and makes a lot more sense than the
Putting in an answer that's not really an answer. You're answering a mystery with a mystery. Yeah.
Yeah. So religious people feel they have the answers for everything, right? They know how life started, really, what the purpose of the universe is. But if they really do introspection, there are a lot of contradictions. And that should make you even more uncomfortable. I mean, the cognitive dissonance, it's this uncomfortable feeling of having conflicting ideas in your brain. So I don't really know how religious people do it anymore. You should get sick from all the contradictions, especially as we know more and more and more, and it's so blatant that we have a good grasp of a lot of the things. How do you go on ignoring all of that? And say, no, this is true, this is true.
Did you have, you said you don't know exactly when you kind of like stopped believing, but did you have the experience where you no longer needed to like run some like extra software in your head to make some of this stuff make sense? You know, to me that was a very real kind of feeling that, oh, I don't have to keep on like pretending, you know, and I don't need to, you know, keep on running this kind of background software to make sense of all this.
I guess I kind of had something similar. I had, so there was a lot of things I did just out of habit. So kind of just every night to pray before I went to bed. That was drilled into me. I have to pray every night, And even after I kind of struggled with this and I kind of gave it up, some nights I would lay there and okay, do I pray? Do I not? I used to do this. And yeah, it sort of, it was difficult for me, in a way, to give up praying every night. It was something I did, and in a way, it's a way also to reflect just on your day. And I kind of had to convince myself a couple of nights in a row that, don't do this, don't think about it, stop. And then eventually it got easier to let go of that. So it's I guess for me it's because I grew up religious, a lot of it is understandable. I get where a lot of people are coming from. I get it's not, my wife, she did not grow up religious. She was always kind of agnostic. And she doesn't understand this. She still cannot understand. Do people really believe that? I was like, yes, they really believe that.
What's the religious? I don't know very much about South Africa. You know, as far as compared to America, I assume you're on average less religious. But am I mistaken in that?
Surprised.
Okay.
I think actually South Africa is right up there with most religious. It's probably in the 80% religious.
Majority Dutch Reformed? Is that the primarily, or is Catholics?
That's probably the biggest. No, definitely more Dutch Reformed. Yeah. So Christianity by far, that's probably 60+%. There's quite a big Islam community as well in South Africa. And then my wife, there's sort of like a growing sort of, atheist, like everywhere in the world. Hopefully it's growing.
And is it racially? Is there a big divide? Is religious? What's the?
Not really.
No. Okay.
I think it's. I've always found it kind of interesting that black people are super religious, even though I'm guessing that the white people brought Christianity to Africa, and they preached that as a white God, and right, all the pictures of Jesus is white, even though he grew up in, the Middle East. Yes.
Small input. The Ethiopian Coptic Church did start early enough that it wasn't introduced by the modern conception of white people. It was more of like a Greco-Roman thing that integrated itself naturally. But from what I'm reading on Wikipedia, the Dutch Reformed tradition, kind of the more Protestant flavors of Christianity, definitely were introduced to the region. In fact, it says here that the church actually supported apartheid until fairly recently.
Yeah, so
Not to say it's your fault.
my grandfather's fault. But that's one of the things, right? Is how the ruling party during apartheid, what was called the National Party, how they kind of hid behind the church. And they kind of said what we're doing is sort of a command from God. It's, the Bible says we should do this, and we are the chosen one, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you just shows that you can interpret the text any way you want, right? That's what it comes down to. That's one of my favorite things to talk to when I still was a little bit more militant, and is I hate it when religious people say you cannot live a moral life, you cannot have morals if it doesn't come from God. But it's so circular because their morals, they are more moral than God and the Bible, right? Because they nitpick which morals they follow. There are a lot of bad examples in the Bible, but no, that you should read metaphorically. So they're already kind of projecting their morals onto the Bible, not the other way around.
So they clearly have so they've got a standard that they're using to judge the Bible.
They have a higher standard than the Bible already.
Is this what triggered you with the Connectleys? What was the Connectly? I don't recall what the issue was that got you. You were just out there hanging out.
I was just out there hanging out. I don't remember exactly what it was now. I mean, if I think about it for a while, it might come to me. But they were having. I didn't plan to get involved. They were having a conversation with someone right next to me. And it was one of those where you're like, I have to say something. I cannot leave this stand. It could have been the morals thing. I don't remember, but then it turned into a long, conversation. But it's fun. I kind of still enjoy those conversations. I have to hand it to them. They are well prepared. They have an answer for everything. They've done it for many years. And they know what they're doing for a living. Yeah, literally.
Well, they weren't prepared for when you pulled out that story about that guy. What was he?
The World War II prisoner.
Yeah, he wasn't prepared for that. He got
in his book a reference to like a thing.
It was an apocryphal story of like a POW who got killed by taking the blame for some offense. And Cliff said, "My good friend of it saw it personally." And then Bob says, "Actually, this was a story that not only had wildly different accounts, but developed as a rumor from this college 20 years prior. So if what you're saying has now these many holes in it, how many does the Gospels have?" And Cliff got fucking incensed, and he stood up and started walking around on stage.
Yeah.
Like, he got up from his seat and started pacing, and then his son had to copy him afterwards when it was his turn and started pacing. So Bob and Gabe are just sitting here quietly answering questions, and then when it's their turn, Cliff and Stewart, they stand up and pace the stage. Because it just really rattled.
There was also, I thought, there was like it was the most silent the crowd had turned, and you could only hear the gears turning in cognitive dissonance. But it reminds me, I can't remember what you said that reminded me of this, but before you talked about cognitive dissonance and how you must imagine their heads are heating up all day, thinking somehow they can believe in evolution, put those together or whatever. But I think specifically people that are religious, they may be the kind of people that don't like feeling cognitive dissonance. And so they can just go, "Oh, I know this new information can't be true.
Right, yeah.
This information I have is secure. This is read-only. You can't touch this. I know for a fact that the world was created in 7 days. So what I just read online is is AI propaganda.
There's a good example of that actually, and I was going to bring it up when you were mentioning the psychology thing, or wanted to bring it up. There's a Yale lecture courses on YouTube called Global Problems of Population and Demographic Change. And in one of the videos, the lecturer is talking about how efforts in I can't remember what country it was, but they wanted to talk about fertility, and they had a person come in and explain to a group of rural people how reproduction works. And as soon as the lecture was over, all of the women that were in there, they walk out and they immediately go, and they just heard a doctor, she was talking about reproductive issues. They find a janitor cleaning and go and grab her and ask her if it was true. Because their system of trusting things was to trust things they heard from the local community and be suspicious of anything outside of it, just as a natural reflex. And I think that that is more common, so to speak, than we would like to imagine, especially when it comes to as you were mentioning, cognitive dissonance with creationism versus scientific issues. I mean, I know growing up, anytime the TV said millions of years, you had to rebut it, it's not true. It was just a constant thing.
Yeah,
That was with me, how it was with me too. I didn't think about these things until around high school. It was obvious to me that there was only 10,000 years old. Because everyone I knew and trusted at the time said that. I knew God existed because I felt Him. I'd experienced Him.
I also felt Him, man.
So you don't have cognitive dissonance because these things that you hear that are in opposition to all of your knowledge and experience is just absurd, so you throw it out.
But I guess, exactly, but that's my point. It's so absurd because everything makes sense to you the way it is now, right? It's so pervasive because God is in everything. It all makes sense. There's one bit of evidence you bring, that's not going to change everything, so that has to be wrong because it doesn't fit into my whole worldview that makes sense at this moment. And that's why you need to, in a way, break it down bit by bit by bit by bit. You're never going to convince someone in one conversation. It needs to, and on one topic, you need to, the whole thing. Start from the beginning. So funnily enough, before it was 42, and when I was still a bit more militant, when I started thinking about this bit, I initially wanted to do something with kind of, there's a bit of a play on the Bible with the book. So you'll notice that, and this is all intentional, there's no name on the book. Just like the Bible is just the Bible. The Bible is usually dark black with just the Bible. I decided I want to do something very similar. No names, just this is the truth. As a Ralph. What's the first line in the Bible?
It depends on the translation. In the beginning was the word. No, wait, that's John. I'm sorry.
No.
In the beginning, God created them.
Yes, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void.
So you'll see, I start my book with in the beginning there was a bad. But this was the eventual kind of instantiation of the idea. Initially, I said, okay, what I should do is I should do 66 books like the Bible. I should have exactly the same titles for the books, or book names, and I wanted to do a bit of a more rip on the Bible. And then I, somewhere calmed down. I said, okay, maybe that's what I did. What are my other crazy ideas?
The Life of Brian version?
One of my other crazy ideas was to, so this is just self-published on Amazon. So for Amazon, unfortunately, you have to put in a author name. And I joked for a little while with maybe, what if I literally just say Jesus Christ? This is the new. And I was worried of backlash, so I just maybe not push too hard as the author of the book. But yeah, so maybe something I can quickly say. So, can I go on?
Yeah. You may have to bleep my cursing if you don't want to get copyright. My bad. My cursing. I blame work. All the people I'm working around now curse like sailors.
Are they all like 30 something?
No, they're all 20. And they look older than me because of
So,
manual labor and bacon.
I'm trying to get this published now through an actual publisher, because if you do it self-publish, you don't have actual physical copies in a bookstore. But I need to raise money to get it published, because traditional publishers, they don't really take unknown people and we don't have a big following. So the other way is what they call a hybrid publisher. So you share some of the costs initially to print books, but they help with the distribution and marketing. Anyway, there's this website, Publishizer, and this is how you can raise money for books if you want to check it out. So I'm going to make small changes to the book. So this came out, I think, was in 2022, you'll see in there. So as this happens in the last 3 years, I had some new revelations that I want to work into the book. So I'm going to merge a couple of chapters to make room for 2 more chapters, but it needs to stay 42. I'm going to make some small changes so that there will be, hopefully sometime, there will be a newer version that you can also buy. But if you want to contribute, I launched it this morning. Yes. It's brand new.
Then will we have to have like a council to decide which are the appropriate books to go into the final version? Maybe Apocrypha.
So, on that, right, I guess my bigger vision for 42 is to eventually also outlive me. So, kind of my opening in the book, the preface, says that that's the other reason I didn't want to put a name on the book, is I see this book as bringing out new editions. So, one of the problems with something like the Bible, right, that we all know is it was written 2,000 years ago. It's not really relevant anymore. If you want to have a book that gives you answers to the world and how to live, the book should evolve. It cannot be a static book. So the idea is it should be like an evolving book. As we make new scientific discoveries, the book should update itself. As we have new moral insights, I mean, apartheid. Short couple of years ago, some people thought it was okay to treat other people like that. So morality is also evolving. So our scientific discoveries are evolving. Morality is evolving. Morality should be a discussion between well-informed people always. And so as our views of life change, I want the book to bring out new editions. Okay, now we know this. So in the book now we said the universe is 13.8 billion years old. There's a lot of even doubt about that now. It was sort of settled until the James Webb telescope, and now, oh man, we know that now. Is it older? You kind of, you know, if you said you're all kind of excited about astronomy, but they found big galaxies very early in the universe, and it shouldn't be there. So is the universe older than we think? Is there something we're missing? So as we figure that out, the book should update itself. And my vision, I don't know if it's ever going to happen, is it should outlive me. It should be a constant. You know, I always thought it would be cool. They say 1,000 years from now, and people can go, what did people 1,000 years ago think? And then there's this one book they can go, they thought the Earth was 13.8 billion years old. Ha ha ha. And they thought it's fun to eat animals. And if I can really get some buy-in, I would love it if every chapter is actually written by an expert in the field. So, you know, Sean Carroll writes a chapter on quantum physics.
So the opposite of Answers in Genesis.
Yes. But again, it's sort of a play on the Bible. You have different authors of the different books, something similar. But in this case, it's actual experts in the field writing a chapter on that topic. And yeah, I don't know how to do that. I contacted Sean Carroll once, sent him an email, and he just said, sorry, I'm too busy. And I mean, the other people didn't even answer me.
Have you ever seen the Neil deGrasse Tyson video? He's asked the question, what's the most astounding fact you can share, you know, with an audience? And he talks about the fact that, you know, when he looks at the sky, he knows that what makes him up is the results of nucleosynthesis in stars. Generations and generations of stars have become him. I used this in one of my assignments early on in the semester, and I had one student reply like, nucleus, that's all bunk. He's completely wrong about all this stuff. And I don't think I actually responded to the student, but I think the beauty of science is that if Neil deGrasse Tyson realized tomorrow that, we're actually mistaken about how, he would be the most excited about it. And that's really a telling thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, and that's why I know that this is not the final answer. It will never be the final answer, right? And I'll never claim it to be the final answer. And like you said, it's exciting if we know we're wrong with something. I mean, if at CERN, if they find something strange in what's happening there, might there be a fifth force in the universe? That gets people excited, which is great. So, yeah, I know that video by Neil deGrasse Tyson. If you remember, I never remember, but I used a lot of that also in this book. About how, if you look at the abundance of elements in the universe, it's hydrogen, helium, carbon, there's sort of a rank of the abundance of elements, and that's exactly what we're made up of, except for nitrogen, not nitrogen, helium. So we are literally, what the universe had it offer to the elements to make humans, that's exactly what we are. We are mostly hydrogen, and then, there's sort of in exactly the same proportions then as in the universe.
There must be two different types of humans, because some of them are cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
I think this goes back to a few points. So I know you talked about it was hard to stop praying because given that there's no God to pray to, it doesn't really make a point, but it's satisfying in a sense because it's basically journaling. It's basically recounting your day, as you said. So they say something good in the ritual of doing it, and that ritualistic aspect is really one of the main benefits of the Western Church, the Western Christian Church at large, because people say that we're talking about Greg said that he had to that was word, like religious experiences with God and so on. And this is more of a joke, but do you remember seeing somebody on the internet who said that she believed in God because when she went to church, she had a religious experience, and then she went to a One Direction concert and she played the same way. So she just heard actually like on stage performances.
Yeah.
But still, there's idea that ritual and that sense of community we have with the church that kind of fills in a lot of human needs. And we talked about how the world is becoming more atheist, but I know a lot of countries in the West, I know for a fact in the UK, Gen Z are more religious than millennials are at the moment. There's been a sharp uptick, especially since 2020, in religiousness in the West. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is,
why?
I would say it makes one of the biologically clever. Humans are social animals. We're wired for all this stuff. We're wired to have our own rituals and take it slowly. But I guess how to combat this, how to, not even combat it directly, but make people understand that it's not the religion in itself that's making them feel good, but it's just the way it supplements all these needs.
I would like to add a small thing. You mentioned a lot of younger people being more religious. If you go to 5 Below, the book section is all astrology and alchemy and witchcraft. And not to sound like a Baptist preacher, but those elements are becoming more of a popular mysticism. So when we say, becoming more religious, I just want to add, even mystical aspects, small and niche practices of religion are practical.
But this just seems like this is cyclical because Robert Ingersoll, the late 19th century, you had all these spiritualists and the seances and all that kind of stuff. It just seems like it repeats itself. Yeah.
Can I tell you something funny on that? I mentioned my wife grew up atheist. Her dad is Dutch, so he also grew up atheist. So she grew up atheist, but her dad took her to church. And they went to church on Sunday. So her dad was a teacher. And he said, as a teacher, I need to do that. I need to be seen in the community, go to church. I went to church. And she I want to say she kind of accepted his explanation, never really understood it, but, so here's a fun fact. At this moment, we sometimes go to church on Sundays. Again, my wife doesn't understand. I mentioned it earlier. She said these people cannot really believe this, but she likes the music, she likes the community, she likes them. And so I've been to church here, Pine Lake, the big one, a couple of times, and there are a lot of young people. It is packed, and it's interesting for me to see. They take notes. They sit there and they open their Bible and they take notes, and so I guess it's something to this whole we do something together community. My wife still thinks in her head people do it for just that part. She's still adamant people cannot be so stupid to believe this. And I tell her, listen, I think most of these people believe it, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they don't believe it. Maybe it's more just for this community thing. Because what we realized since we got here, and we kind of, I wouldn't say we take advantage of it, but we do use it, is the church does a lot of things, right? They especially if you have a son, or a child, any can be a girl as well. If you have kids, there are a lot of church activities and things they present, and probably their way to get them while they're young, indoctrinate them soon. But we go to the church has Halloween parties. I mean, in South Africa, that's Halloween is Halloween parties, and they have a lot of functions. On Valentine's Day, the Methodist Church had free babysitting for your kid. We took our kids, said, here, stay here, we're going to go on a date. Thank you. They offered a free babysitting service on Valentine's Day. They gave the kids food. They didn't ask any money for it. They said, you can make a donation if you want. But, couples night out. After your kid, they gave our kid food, they played with them, we went on a date. So, I kind of enjoy that part of the church, right? I don't have to believe what they say on Sunday. I use that hour in the church to sit and meditate and think about stuff, and I plan experiments in my head. Got to zone out. My kid is having fun with his friends. They have a little Sunday class, and they draw pictures, and my son comes out and says, did you know Jesus made wine? Yeah, that's great. Go Jesus.
Wine's fantastic.
In a way, the church, probably especially here in the South, is, I see it as more than just a church. I mean, I see for students as well, the church gives you, during exam times, you can go eat food there, you can go study there, they support you. It's a good resource if you use it for that, right? So maybe the answer is to get something else that replaces all of that, right?
Right. We have all the good without having to listen to a sermon or pretend that we believe something that is unbelievable.
I have to also say that the preacher here is a lot more engaging than the one I was used to in South Africa. That was torture sitting through a sermon there. This guy is excited. I mean, I try not to listen. Sometimes I find myself listening to you for a couple of minutes. Oh, wow.
Was the church community, when you were in South Africa, were they not quite as involved? Not just in local community, but just in general?
I guess so. Honestly, church for me in South Africa was, we go there on Sundays, that's it.
Gotcha.
Go Sunday, listen to the guys speak. As a kid, you go to Sunday school after, so you have to sit through the church, and then after church, you go to Sunday school, to do your thing, and that was it. That was all the church did. As far as I know, maybe there was more, we were just not involved in it.
Is there an official state church in South Africa?
No.
No, okay, all right. Because that's, often the knock has been, on the Church of England, the fact that it is a state church. There's no competition. Here in America, it's the competition. That all these churches are fighting for bodies, and they're fighting for tithes, and therefore they up their game and they provide more services.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I have to say, I grew up in let's say a mid-sized town, and I just went to church when my parents went. When I went to university, I saw that as well in South Africa. All the churches fighting to get the students, right? Trying to make it fun, a bit more engaging. And there's also a lot of different kind of denominations there. And, I honestly don't even really know the difference between all the denominations. And I went to the one my parents took me to. I never really actually even tried to find out what the differences are. Usually it's something silly like, we allow guys, we don't split.
Right.
We allow women, we don't split.
Right, right. We baptize children, we don't, infant
Yeah,
baptism,
yeah,
all
yeah.
that kind of, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange concept, the whole religious thing, but it, like I said, there's something to it, right? There's just this whole community. But I know also that you mentioned the One Direction thing, and Lawrence Krauss also, that's also always his counter is, yes, but you can have exactly the same at a big concert. Why do you need to do it at a church? And there's a lot of other ways you can do the same thing. This is going to be the answer, right? So, part of my vision is, people like to wear little crosses around their necks. We're going to wear little 42. We're going to get 42 tattoos. I want to see 42.
They're going to think we're big Jackie Robinson fans.
And, sorry, I just wanted to add to what I was saying before. The statistics, I know the stat for the UK, specifically Christian identifying youth, is increasing.
Gotcha.
And I do not think that's necessarily the only reason, but I do see it as a very big reinforcing reason, especially as it's just kind of hard to go out and do it, especially here in Mississippi. Like, I've been living here for 10 years. There's nothing to do, especially where my parents live at the moment. The closest thing to us is a church. It's 10 minutes of driving away, but it's a church. And everybody in the community, my step-grandparents, put in their wood that when they're gonna die, the church is gonna take their house and they're gonna sell it so the church can take the money from the house. So it's a very intense intertwining, and I don't know, just for me, I guess, I'm just trying to think of ways to make people see that all the stuff that's associated with the church, like the community and so on, is not dependent on the church in itself. It can be done outside. It's just that the church has monopolized it, so it can, seize or dispower this social capital.
But the church has the benefit of being tax-free as well.
I saw that, yes.
And that's, I think, that kind of helps it with doing a lot of these things.
I do have a quick question. When you say the church, I was reading quickly on the Wikipedia page for the Dutch Reformed one. Like, y'all had synods and bishops and stuff, there was a structure, there was an overarching church, right? I mean,
Probably.
oh, okay, then. I wanted to check because.
It's more, you're saying it's mainstream, it's a denomination as opposed to
I'm
non-denominational.
saying there's a big distinction between the church in Europe, where you have a state-sponsored church, and in other Presbyterian denominations, where here in the South, churches are small and atomized.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that you can't have the same abuses, but I'm saying I know people that start, people that my family knows, they start house churches, it's 20 people and it stays at 20 people. So churches are just sort of a common thing that spring up naturally. You can almost make the argument it's like a cult with having official branding on it, but obviously that has negative connotations.
But so in that sense, the Dutch Reformed Church was more there was a structure. There was even within the church that you go to, there's your minister and his underlings or the elders or whatever. But then there's a national body for the church, and they have a leader. The Senate gets together to discuss: are we going to allow the gays or not? But that's literally what at this moment that's still happening in South Africa. The Dutch Reformed Church, they are discussing this.
That happened here with the Methodists.
Yeah, exactly. How do we feel about the gays?
So we're going to have the Dutch Reformed, Reformed squared.
They made a decision a while ago that we accept homosexuals. It lasted for 2 years and it's back on the agenda again because too much, pushback from a lot of people. And so I heard it happened here with the Methodist Church as well. And the church kind of split, right?
They lost a third of their members in buildings.
Yeah. So now there's the Global Methodist Church and there's the First Methodist, something like that, right? And the one is fine with, and the other not. It's crazy.
Yes. I wanted to ask. So I've talked to quite a few people, and I feel like the best way to go about especially for Christians, I think going about changing their minds that I found most effective is actually going with the idea that is presented of justice in the Bible. Because the view is essentially look, we've done something horribly wrong, essentially, and we deserve to be punished for it. Okay, sure, if that's what is just, that's what's just. Like, don't even argue about it at all. And then proceed to ask, okay, if that's the case, Jesus essentially is just, he takes away the punishment and puts it on himself. That doesn't really seem like justice at all. It seems like you can make like, there's the classic kind of like argument that you can do that where it's like, you're sitting in a courtroom and you see a serial killer or whatever. He's incredibly sorry for what he's done. He's distraught over absolutely everything. He's been making changes in prison. You know he's going to continue to make changes down the road, and he's seeking, and you know, he's being put on trial for life in prison. And then the judge's son walks in and it's like, hey, he's really, really sorry for what he did. You can see how distraught he is. You can see that he's going to make changes in his life. I'll take the prison sentence. And it's like, what? Nowhere in life would we ever do this. It's like, if we want to say that, oh, God is merciful, you're being forgiven because you're truly repentant and you're going to do good things, okay, give him the mercy. Why are we still carrying out like a punishment into someone who doesn't deserve it? If we're already granting mercy, why does there need to be punishment then? Mercy is the suspension of the justice or the judgment, right? And if we understand it in that framework, it's like, okay, and if Jesus is God just punishing himself for letting us go? Like, it's just like, is he kind of a masochist? Like, it's really weird. And then like, I was talking to a Catholic about this, and his view of like purgatory was that, you know, after you're done, you still have these venial sins, these like minor sins. And so you have to go to purgatory, essentially you wait out your time. So justice is still being served on you. And I was like, okay, well if justice is still being served, why is he punishing himself then? If justice is being served on us, does he just want the punishment for himself? Like what's kind of happening here?
Well, this seems like
a really good way to just like leap in things and be like, yeah, that is really strange. Why would he want to punish himself?
That's actually a talking point among Protestants. They reward Catholics for keeping his body on the cross. They think it's distasteful.
But what I've seen, a recurring theme with the Knechtleys, with Ralph's dad, and with Bill Wortman, is this psychological need for justice. You know, it seems like the believers, whereas, as far as I can tell, the universe is indifferent. I think that seems to be a really major difference in the worldviews. You know, where some people, they're so beholden to, they need to have this sense of justice. The murderer who appears to have gotten away with it, you know, and goes to his grave, you know, having never served a prison sentence, that person needs to get their comeuppance somewhere. You know, and they just can't seem to live with the fact that, as far as I can tell, nothing's going to happen to that person. You know, and I've got to be all right with that. And that's I think a fundamental difference in the way we view the world when we're talking about worldviews. And how do you?
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, just to add more on that, part of it I would say is also because if there is a God who delivers justice, you can be like, oh, this person is going to be punished for what they've done. If there's not a God to deliver justice, okay, if we want justice to be delivered in the end, maybe it doesn't happen, but I say we really want justice to be delivered, we have to do it. Like, it kind of takes away, again, a cop-out of, you know, like, you now have to be proactive in making an active change. And I would dare say that that's also part of it. I find that a lot of time people who are very, very, I'll say this, like, with my kinds of Christians, like these kind of Christians who are very, you know, good with that, like, not being too certain, but they feel like there's a God, so they're going with it, and so on. And I'm not talking about the cop-out because they're trying to make this, you know, other dream of reality that it just cannot interact with, so it's not their duty or responsibility to do anything about it. It's just, you know, I guess that sense of comfort. It's really just chasing comfort and not having to deal with having any sort of responsibility. And I would say that sense of partially just the direct strength of character. For the kind of Christian, again, as I said, there's nuance.
I think there's something to that, but ironically also, there's obviously something to like charity in the church as well, and people actually using the church to do what they feel is good. As you have seen, that is something that's big, at least in the U.S. So that's one of the things that people like really fight for tax exemption for churches for, is that they can use all this money for good stuff, and some of them do.
And that was mentioned at the Collegiate Day of Prayer. They had a guy read through it was a very weak reading of scripture, but we'll ignore that. He read through, no, he actually read through James. And James's criticism of true religion being actually helping. And that they did try to emphasize that in the service of helping people, but it was within the context of helping people by becoming better Christians. And that can be a little bit vague, but as you mentioned, it is something that is emphasized in certain cultures.
And also, you know that there are a lot of people who do hurt to the church for the idea of charity. Like, if they feel like they have to do it to the church because like church is what the church is supposed to do, that becomes self-serving. They're doing it just because they find comfort in that, because that they know they're going to go to heaven. Like it's, to be frank, it's extremely selfish. And I do think being hurtful towards other people is selfish no matter what, because having a better community is going to improve your standards, and it becomes kind of a cycle and whatnot. But a lot of those people generally do what they think is charity because they think it's going to make them go to heaven. I mean, let's talk about like mission trips with Pine Drake. Funny enough, they posted their mission trips about a month ago, and I showed them to you. So their trip of mission trips are going to be, they're going to Munich to preach.
Yes.
To Munich.
To the godless Germans.
To the godless Bavarians.
Oh,
Not Germans, the Bavarians. They have to have a different conservative party because of how religious and conservative they are.
They worship God the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly.
They have too much gold in their churches.
They're going to Hernando, Mississippi. They're going to Providence, Rhode Island, and this is the best one. Africa. It just says Africa.
Just in general.
Yeah, just Africa. Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Someone from Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a
No, that's the thing. Like, a lot of these people, like, I'm Romanian. I was born there. I moved here and I was like, in Romania is like 95% religious and like 88% Orthodox. Then people have mission trips in Romania. And I
My
get
uncle does them. He's baptized people in their rivers.
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's like we can talk about, they're doing it, and yes, it's saying they have a different definition of charity because they see it as charity of the soul, as saving somebody's soul, and they're ignoring the actual material basis of what makes a person happy and so on. And I'm sorry, I just felt the need to bring that up because I agree that the church can do a lot of good, but a lot of these people, first of all, treat as absolute authority on what is good and what is actually charitable. I mean, for the love of God, the Eastern Orthodox Church believed that doing pogroms was good in the 1920s. That goes their charity to the world, like genocide. It is also just, again, it comes back to what I said before, it brings them comfort because they don't actually have to think about what the church is doing is right or not. It's just charity, it's according to the Bible. They cop out of actually having to take responsibility and initiative of what should actually happen.
But the question is, if it gives them comfort and if they're happy, should we just leave them? I mean, I'm okay with people being religious.
Yeah.
I want to believe it.
Yeah.
Until they use that to enforce laws or something on me, if they use their religious kind of dogma to make policy decisions, then it's a different story. Like a lot of what's happening.
Right. Yeah, because it was, and that's the fear, that's the concern about Christian nationalism, is essentially we're trying to say, hey, these institutions are Christian and therefore we can make decisions based on Christian beliefs for everybody.
And that's part of what I was saying, because for them, like, being charitable and saving somebody's soul can include making a registration that goes according to their view to make, America great again by, restoring the, by making a Christian reawakening in the United States. They see that as charity. They consider that an act of universal and absolute good.
Yeah.
And that's the issue with that, where we center the idea of charity on the church, I would say.
And circling back around to what you said earlier towards the beginning about, hopefully if we have a more coherent set of facts that we're all working with, that reduces some of this friction. That was one thing also Bob brought up when he was talking with one of the representatives of the National Day of Prayer at the last meeting we had here. Bob was bothered by the language on the website that said specifically spiritual warfare, that the institution, this group of Collegiate Day wants to do spiritual warfare against principalities in high places, and I had to explain to a couple people that there is a southern, perhaps more charismatic evangelical idea, all the word salad you have to say to get it in the right box, that a nebulous force of demons are actively running and controlling things. It's very similar to conspiracy theories surrounding cabals or whatever. But that is what it is, that demons are controlling things and you have to fight them through prayer and fasting and meditation or whatever. And that happened at the Collegiate Day of Prayer service yesterday, where they talked about deliverance from these bad things that are brought on by demons. And one of the things they mentioned was anxiety, depression, a vague sense of lust, feeling bad, purposelessness, and all the side effects on the pharmaceutical commercials. So I guess what I'm saying is that, like, if you're operating with demons as an explanation for everything that ails you, that is going to make it difficult, if we're operating on things like medical issues. Because I know people that they're perfectly fine with things like diabetes or cancer being physical ailments, but mental illness is entirely demons.
Right. And so someone who believes this that's going to persist for them, as opposed to actually seeking out real care. And that's a problem. That's why beliefs inform actions, and in this case, an inaction to actually get help.
The most extreme example I have personally is I have a relative who he doesn't want to get vaccines. He's also a flat earther, but that's unrelated. He doesn't want to get vaccines specifically because he believes they're filled with dead babies or something. Like basically, there was some stem cell used in the 70s from a voluntarily terminated, not even like a few months in, pregnancy that was going to self-terminate anyway. Like it was completely insalvageable. And those line of cells have been used in cultures that were eventually used in the research for one of the vaccines he would have to take. And he is anti-vax, both because of that and because he made an oath before God not to vaccinate. Which, it's not like the Old Testament has stories saying not to do that on many occasions. But my point is that that is an issue. If we're operating under a different set of assumptions and facts, we can make what would be perfectly rational decisions if everything I just said was true, but isn't.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. There will be millions of examples of how you can make bad decisions based on dumb beliefs.
And that's the reason.
And that's why we have a fatality in Texas.
Measles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And those parents were. My suspicion is those parents thought they were doing what was right for the child. So where do parental rights end? Where does the state step in and make decisions on behalf of the child?
Yeah. Good question.
It's a sticky wicket. And there's a lot of nuance, and unfortunately, nuance is not always appreciated. It's again, the certainty is black and white thinking. A lot of these issues are not black and white. There's a lot of nuance there. But unfortunately, there's a kid that's dead that shouldn't be dead. At the end of the day, and as far as I'm concerned, that
the one statistic, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I kind of vaguely remember reading this, and there was a book that looked at all the different metrics between atheists and then super religious people and moderately religious, and kind of on education and a lot of stuff atheists kind of do well. On the happiness scale,
Yeah.
religious people are all more happy, right? And
We also have shorter lifespans.
Yeah. And I mean, I would add to that, what would make somebody not become religious? If they grew up being religious, what would make them be not religious anymore? Bad life experiences. This is, a lot of people talk about those stats. Like I know Christians who have tried to use the happiness idea to convert people to Christianity. Oh, if you believe you're just happier. Or, maybe there are other confounding issues. Like, first of all, the entire community thing I talked about, which is very true in Mississippi, actually. It's like, yes, if you are religious and if you're comfortable going to church, you have the community, so you can't just, get better and serve. And also, as I said, too, if you've had life experiences which force you to question things, those life experiences has probably made you just happy. But again, as Bob said, that's once. That's uncomfortable, that's complicated.
Yeah.
Why talk about it when you can just say Christianity makes you happy?
I think also a powerful thing in religion. Have any of you seen the movie The Invention of Lying? I've seen clips.
I've never seen it. I would like to see it.
Yeah, Ricky Gervais. But so kind of on his, I think it was his mother's deathbed. So no one can lie in this movie. So the world is no one can lie. The brain never figured out how to tell a lie. And then he, for some reason, he makes the first lie. So he had money problem. He went to the bank, he wanted to withdraw money, and they said, you don't have enough money in the bank account. He said, no, I do. And that was the first line. He said, oh, sorry, the system must be wrong. Here's your money. Anyway, long story short, his mother gets ill, and she's on her deathbed, and he tells her, don't worry, there's a life after this one. And it's going to be great, you get everything you want. And one of the nurses overhears this, and she tells it to the world, and all of a sudden, you know, everyone's talking about this afterlife. And they start asking him, what did we get? Do we each get a mansion? Do we each get this? And this is the whole thing. That's a sort of birth of religion, the story. Whole point of this is, I can see how a lot of people can find comfort in an afterlife and how that's a useful thing to, you know, there's a lot of suffering now and I should just push through and accept my fate because I'm going to have a better one after this. It's a terrible way to go through life, but I can see why some people would. And also, especially when you go through something, when you lose a loved one or especially like a child, you think, okay, but
One thing with I always recommend the Bart Campolo and Tony Campolo documentary, and there's a really pretty blunt moment when they're talking about this, the comfort. You know, that Tony Campolo is an evangelist who recently died. His son Bart followed him into the ministry for many years, and then 15 years ago left the ministry and is now a humanist. He's been a humanist chaplain at various colleges, and they did a documentary together. And Bart kind of challenges his father. He's like, you keep on telling me about, you know, the comfort that people derive, you know, for this belief. I've seen you. You don't seem very comforted. You know, he kind of calls his dad out. It's a really powerful moment in the film because, you know, how truly comforted are these people? They say they're comforted, but it's You know, he's actually, you know, he's seen his father, and he sees his father dwindling. His father's retiring. You know, he's seeing his ministry come to an end, and he sees behind the scenes. He sees how upset his father is and how mean his father can be, and et cetera, and he calls him out on camera. And it's a powerful moment.
I need to see that.
Yeah, it's a great documentary. And another thing is Ricky Gervais, Afterlife. Have you watched it? Yeah, that's another. That one I haven't seen The Invention of Lying, but Afterlife is a great series.
One small point against what was the son's name again?
Bart.
He only converted to humanism after suffering a traumatic brain injury in a bicycle in a car accident. So, not really points towards us in that.
But you were talking about mentioning that maybe a selling point for religion is you're happier, right? But, I mean, sort of the way I got to being non-religious, I don't see any way I can convince myself again that any of that's true. So there's no way back.
Yeah.
Another thing too, I'm curious what you think about this, because I've noticed this works quite well in like getting other people to be very like open. Like, so what I tend to do sometimes is I'll kind of parody their position in such a way that you accept like you accept substantialism, you accept moral realism, you accept pretty much everything you can from like an atheistic view as much as possible. Like you can just take like a Platonistic view of like forms, right? And just accept like objective purpose and all this, and you can accept all of that easy, and all you have to do is be like, oh, Platonism is true. And then it's funny too, because like once you do that, or you provide like say someone's talking about like say you provide like an example where like you think Christianity fails in like the moral department, or an objection to like an argument that they made. Like one good way that I found that they like really open up after is if you give them an out, like a slight out, just a slight thing to be like, yeah, you can accept this, and also just move on. Nothing in your view changes at all, just this one tiny thing.
Yeah.
And if you do that, they become more open, and then from there you can push like bigger things, and then they get to thinking more. Like a good example of this that I like to do sometimes is like a time thing. Like a lot of theists will tend to be like, oh, time had a beginning, and it's like, well, that's kind of dumb. Here's a deduct. So I typically go like I typically provide an argument such that like, in order for time to have a beginning, this implies there was a period in which time did not exist. But to understand a period in which time did not exist is just a contradiction. You need time, exactly. So it seems that you're just saying there was no time when time was there. And it's like, that's just, so we all accept then that time did in fact exist, it just wasn't our like current set of time, right? And then they're like, oh yeah, that changes nothing in my view at all, and that makes more sense conceptually. And then from there, they get to understand that your view actually makes sense, because they're typically raised in such an effect where it's like, your whole view that you're presenting is completely and utterly false in every aspect. So if you provide one aspect where they're like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense, why didn't I think of that earlier? You get that open, and then from there you can continue in like a more thing. And then when you provide those like outs, like just slight outs that like aren't even, or just grant things with an argument, it's like so much easier to get them to open up more, and then from there to accept like reasoning much more like slippery kind of. They just take it in much easier.
That makes complete sense. It's interesting you mentioned the time thing now. One of my favorite of these debates is Sean Carroll and William Lane Craig. I don't know if you're familiar with that, by the way. I mean, William Lane Craig likes to point to the Big Bang as evidence for God, right? So there's your first mover, so boom, God. And then William Lane Craig likes to quote, I think it's Alan Guth. And then in this debate, he played into Sean Carroll's hand, like Cliff, whether you played into your hand, but in this one, William Lane Craig again, he said, and Alan Guth, I don't remember exactly what, but...
Is it the one where he brought up the quote from Guth?
Yes, and then Sean Carroll, he said, no, here's Guth, and he had a video prepared, but Alan Guth said, this is not what I meant, this is... that was funny.
Yeah, I've seen that one too. There's another funny one where it's like, there's a funny one with like Frank Turek, and kind of like the same aspect of like Frank Turek being like, like most people definitely know where they were in such like a big event like this. This is why the Gospels are like, majority correct in terms of like the overall presentation. They're 100% correct. And then there's like this psychology student that walks up and is like, yeah, that's actually just wrong. Like, we know that the case, like, for example, like, he brought up 9/11. He's like, most people think that they knew where they were during 9/11, but they're just flat out wrong. Like, we've tested this throughout the so many years, and they're just always wrong consistently.
Yeah.
And Frank Turek's response was, his whole response was just, well, I definitely knew where I was. It's like, thank you for repeating.
You're missing a little bit of it as well. He was incensed that this psychology student would ever imply that you could prove people wouldn't know where they were on such an important national tragedy. He's really good at pivoting and making the room feel like every single person that dares to ask a question is stupid. Like and that is the thing I worry about when we talk to him, is just like,
he's going to switch it.
Well, not only is he going to switch it, his bread and butter is getting audiences of church members to go into, Satan's playground of college campuses and see him own the libs, so to speak. So that, that is what we're in for if we go up and see him.
David may not be familiar. Frank Turek is coming to campus on March 27th. Who's invited him?
Turning Point USA.
Yes.
Turning Point USA is sponsoring his visit. So he's going to be speaking in the cool hall at one of the rooms.
Are you?
I'm attending.
Are you getting him in for something?
No. We'll just attend.
He doesn't.
So I need to go there.
Definitely. I promise he will not be able to answer it because he's 100% wrong.
His whole shtick is that he plugs his book to sell, and the way he does this is by having a Q&A at the end of his 25-minute presentation, and then he takes the clips and uploads them on YouTube and makes his money through that.
Right. He's selling his I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. That's his book, that's his website, that's his, right, yeah. I don't really know that much about him, but
He's a little bit better than William Lane Craig just because like he doesn't actively support genocide. Like you've seen that clip of Craig, right? There's a clip where Craig said, well, actually, the Israelites who had to kill all the women and infants and crying children when they went into Jericho and to Achan, they were the ones that really suffered because all those women and children that they raped and killed, they went to heaven instantly. And he says that point blank and looks at the camera and doesn't feel an ounce of shame. Turek at least has enough sense to feel shame for something like that. So I like him better, but he's still wrong.
I'm not sure. I feel like I like Turk. I like Will Craig more.
Really?
Just because he's more consistent when he says something to the effect of like,
Gotcha.
oh, I think infantism is like, you know, metaphysically implausible to me, where Frank Turk will just deny infantism is even possible. And it's like, have you read anything on the subject? I know that it's like very well supported.
I think that sort of tracks him to me, is just that bold confidence in places he has no business being.
True, yeah. There's a funny video, I'll show it later, where a Mormon actually comes up, and Mormon theology and like their stuff is, I honestly argue, more coherent and like more, like if you're coming.
Though
from
you
the
should add a
Christian-
caveat that, and as DJ mentioned, is inherently racist, so you may want to be careful.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with that. But it's funny because like the Mormon guy was like, look, you say like in it's like one of the Gospels with Paul, he mentions how like 500 people saw like the risen Jesus and all that, and the Mormon guy asked, he's like, how many like of those testimonies do we actually have besides just Paul? And it's like, well, we have just Paul. And so if that's the case, like
Probably no meeting next week, by the way, we should probably.
oh yeah, no meeting next week, yeah. All right, have a good one.
That's next week.
Spring break, Friday before spring break.
Next week already.
Well, the week following, but we won't meet on a Friday night before spring break, so everyone's gonna be gone, so.
But it was funny because so Mormons have in like the front of the text you have like 12 signatures of like people who say they saw the angel Moroni, as well as the tablets. So they have all of these things.
The tablets he didn't use.
Yeah, the tablets he didn't use. And it's funny because like Turek was like, well, you know, some of those people left or whatever, and the Mormon guy was like, yeah, and the people who left, who signed the thing, they still upheld that it was the case. So regardless of whether or not you think that, you know, it was, you know, corrupt or whatever, we have sufficient reason to understand that they left the church, for one. They were excommunicated, yet they still upheld that they saw everything. We have essentially more evidence than you for our whole supernatural claim, yet you're saying we should just reject our thing because our prophet, you know, might have had some dealings in the past when he wasn't a good person, but we have like more stuff. And it was funny, he stumbled for a long time till he finally was like, yeah, well, Mormonism is just false, bro. And that was it. Like, it was so funny, he just gave up at the end. And the Mormon guy was just like, just killed it. Like, it was insanely good. And like, it's funny because like Turek has like this thing, he loves to assert things with just absolute confidence. I don't know where the confidence comes from.